basically 3 months ago, I was in this situation where I thought I was unhappy. So I was in this situation where I thought I was unhappy. I was working a lot. I didn't know if I was unhappy, one. And if I was unhappy, two, I didn't really know how to fix that. So I kind of tried, I wanted to explore this whole space of happiness and how to improve it. So how do we do that? I wanted to measure my happiness and mood. I think one way to do that is to track passive data. You can't only do that from passive data, though. And I wanted a way to kind of enter things in and correlate them with passive data and do all sorts of cool things like machine learning. So what can we use? So I looked at a lot of measurement tools. I looked at a lot of Android apps. I looked at a lot of web apps. Most of them did not suit my needs. They were either too complex. They asked me to fill out like a bunch of surveys, and I think a few of them actually made me angry, because I was like, why am I filling out all these questions? And that completely defeats the purpose of understanding whether I'm happy. And some of them were really trivial. It was like slide up or down and make this happy face a frowny face if you're sad, and that seemed kind of ridiculous to me too. So in the spirit of software, I made my own tool. I made this Android app called Happsee. Basically, my goal was to maximize the information gathered while minimizing the information I actually had to type in, because I'm lazy, and why not? And I also wanted to get periodic reminders. So I wanted it to tell me when I had to do things. So here's some screenshots of that tool. This is the main entry. So I wanted to minimize the information I entered. I entered in some moods. I entered in how happy I was on a 0 to 10 scale. I could type some stuff in if I wanted, and I could attach a photo. And using that, it could generate a bunch of graphs. It could do some cool analysis and tell me different things, like when you're engaged, you're this happy, show me my photos, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been tracking my happiness since October. Actually, this chart is since November 1st, 2013. So as you can see, I did not have a good December. I guess I didn't really like my holidays. But now I'm much better. I'm good. You got me at my peak. Aren't you happy, guys? So this is me at my peak. It doesn't get any better than this. And here's a cool happiness map. So as you can see, I live around here in the big yellow spot. So sometimes I'm happy when I'm home. Sometimes I'm not, I guess, and that averages out. I tend to be happier when I'm outside. And the power of this cool map is that you can zoom in and out. So I guess I like Boston more than New York. So I have some dots in New York that are yellow. So if any of you are New Yorkers. I like Kansas, but I'm not going to zoom out far enough to get to Kansas. So here are my moods over time. These are my negative moods specifically. So we can see that these have changed. So basically what this is the top means that I'm really feeling that mood over time, and this is a smoothed average. And the units are kind of, as you saw when you entered the moods, it was a binary like 0, 1 thing. But since this is a smoothed averaged, I did a 0, 10 scale. So a 10 means I'm basically feeling the mood like all the time. A 0 means I'm not feeling it at all. So this is tired, is this top line. So I was really tired. Now I'm not so tired, but I'm happier now. So maybe those two have something to do with each other. And as you can see, the other ones are changing here too. So there's uncertain is dropping. Stressed, man, I was like never really that stressed. And bored is dropping. So I'm not bored at all now, guys. So negative moods have been changing, and my positive moods have also been changing, but they've all been going up. So I'm more energetic, which is this line down here. I'm more relaxed, more engaged, and I am also more confident, I guess, maybe. And this is a cool thing. So recently I added the ability to this app to track passive factors. And I don't have any cool charts like correlating these passive factors to different moods. But basically what you're seeing here is a chart from when I added this functionality, which was, I think, the beginning of this month, till now. So tilting, this top one is when I'm using my phone. This is when the phone is still, when I'm not carrying it, when I'm not doing anything with it. This is when I'm walking around, and this is when I'm in a vehicle. So I'm almost never driving. Sometimes I walk around, I guess. Most of the time I'm using my phone. Sometimes I'm sitting around. So this is kind of a way to track that activity over time. And you can imagine getting some really cool correlations with this data. Like, for example, when you use your device, you're unhappy. Maybe don't use your phone so much. And this is just tracking periodic location. So the blue dots are the more recent ones. So that's where I was more recently. And the gray dots are further back in time. So this is basically just tracking my location passively every hour or so. And there's a couple other like passive things that I'm tracking, and I can talk about that in the questions if you want. So this is a cool word cloud. Basically, these are a bunch of words that I mention in my entries. And the greener something is, the happier I am when I mention that. And the less green, like the more yellow, the more unhappy I am. So being sick makes me unhappy, go figure. Green and really green make me happy. Priya's actually my girlfriend's name, and she was like, "You like meetings more than me?" It's like, I was like, yeah, I guess. I mean, meetings are my thing. But basically, I think the key takeaway here is that people make me really happy. Being out, my girlfriend, I really like Happsee apparently for some reason. Kansas was when I went with my girlfriend's family and like had Thanksgiving with them and stuff, and I apparently liked that. So it's kind of interesting. And I was having a lot of sleep issues, so mentioning sleep made me really unhappy because I wasn't getting good sleep. And being in new circumstances generally makes me happy. I repeated this slide because in the Ignite format, sometimes like you don't get a chance to say everything you want, and it auto-advances a slide. Only one person is nodding, so I'll move on from that point. But anyways, this is a duplicated slide, I know. OK, so can you guess what these correspond to? So this top one here is tired. This is happy, happiness, and this is energy. So as you can see, being tired had a huge effect on my happiness. And when I started to get less tired, I started to get a lot more happy. And having this data basically let me start making modifications to how I slept, like using blackout curtains, going to sleep at a certain time. And that really led to me being a lot less tired, and it really improved my happiness. And this is why I created this tool. Like things like this are insights that maybe I would have had otherwise, but I probably wouldn't have. And it's just like it's this huge insight that like you look back on and you're like, maybe that's not so big, but it can change your life. So obviously it is big. So little insights like this. I've also realized, again, that getting out and talking to people makes me a lot happier. So I'm doing a lot more of that. Giving presentations like this, getting outside of my comfort zone. These are all things that I really like that I didn't really know about until I started measuring them. So what am I thinking for the future? I want to use machine learning to predict happiness. So I'm lazy. One thing that gets me that gets me annoyed a little bit is sometimes I have to make a lot of entries to tell the system how happy I am. What if it could just pick up that from passive data? I think that's one thing I want to explore more. Apply my own experience from the past to the future. As Daniel Gilbert, the psychologist, says, everyone has already experienced something that someone else has experienced. And you've probably experienced things that you've experienced in the past. So I'd love to translate that from my past to my future and say, I lost my job a year ago and I got happier in a week. So if I lose my job again, it probably won't have as big an impact on me as I expect. And do image analysis to figure out emotion. If I'm always taking pictures of other people and I'm always taking pictures of sunlight, maybe there's a correlation with happiness of, maybe what I'm taking pictures of has a correlation with my happiness. OK, so yeah, again, the experience sharing, shared understanding. I think it's really important to connect to the people around you. Happiness isn't just a thing about you. It's about how you network with the people around you, how you interact. And there's definitely a lot to explore there. Pull in data from other sources. I've started to track some passive stuff. But you could do things like integrate with Runkeeper, integrate with Fitbit, Yelp, whatever you want to do. All kinds of APIs to play with. So if you want to try it, it's in beta for Android. You can go to the cool website or email me, whatever floats your boat. I have a Twitter too, but it's not on here. Anyways, that's it. Questions? Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you so much. Fascinating, really cool. I was a bit curious about sort of the directionality of cause and effect, or the question between correlation and causation. Like maybe you were getting less sleep because you were unhappy, or maybe you were getting less sleep because you were overworked, which made you both unhappy and other stuff.
Yeah, so Kaggle was mentioned. So Kaggle is this cool site where you get a bunch of data and you can create algorithms from that data. So one of the data sets they had was disambiguating cause and effect. So I made an algorithm for that. And I have an algorithm that does it with like some accuracy. And I want to run this data through it. So I think that would be cool to do. Anecdotally, I can absolutely tell you, well, I can't absolutely, but I can absolutely subjectively tell you that changing my sleep patterns has absolutely impacted my happiness. So Does that answer everything? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Besides blackout curtains, what other things did you test or try out?
I've tested earplugs. I've tested sleeping in different places. I've tested sleeping at different times. I've tested, what else have I tested? I've tested like not sleeping in my apartment, like trying somewhere else, like turning on and off the heaters, like basically everything I could manipulate.
And what worked?
What worked best was cutting off all noise. I bought like a sleep machine that generates like white noise. Earplugs work. Not having any light in the morning. Those are the things that make the biggest difference. Yes.
Did you also track like your food or your exercise habits along with your sleep patterns and see if like those also changed how well you could sleep and how stressed out you were?
Yes, I forgot to mention it, but I wasn't exercising then and I am now. It's hard for me to tell whether that is because now I'm less tired so I can exercise, or I was exercising and then less tired. I'd love to actually integrate some kind of API with like Runkeeper to figure that out, but I can't tell you right now. Yes, ma'am.
So, there's a well-known seasonal affective disorder, but there's actually a reverse of people who get happier in the winter. And it seems like a lot of your tracking happened around the change in daylight savings time. So one question is, have you thought about correlating it with other things, like what's your vitamin D level and, how many hours of sleep and what quality, in other words, what time of the day? And finally, does the act of measuring happiness impact your happiness?
That's interesting. Very interesting. I cannot tell you because I don't have data on my happiness from before I was measuring my happiness.
It's a big time question there, like, right? Whoa.
But yes, I think that's a really good point, and I think there's so much cool stuff you can do with this, and like so much you can correlate it with. It's a struggle for me just to like narrow it down to certain things. I hope that kind of answers something about your question.
The
Yes.
answer is the greenness of the name of your website in your word picture.
Yeah.
You mentioned it often, and it was very green. It made you happy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yes, sir.
And how long does it take to measure your happiness on your app?
So basically, as I showed you, you tap a few moods, you drag a line up or down. You can choose to take a photo or type stuff in. So on the very low end, it takes me like 5 seconds. I just tap buttons, and that's usually what I do. On the high end, I'll actually type stuff in, and that takes like 30 seconds, whatever. I think the goal is to let people be lazy, which people being me, so yeah.
So it looks like you're tapping a few buttons once a day to measure how happy you are every day, right?
It's actually, so it varies on the day. So I have reminders. I can configure it anywhere from 1 to 5, 0 to 5 actually times to remind me every day to actually make an entry. So some days I'll do 0, some days I'll do 5.
What I'm curious about is how do you correlate the specific words on the word cloud with your happiness because you're doing you're measuring your happiness so many times a day. You might mention 1,000 words in one day. So how do you get that correlation?
So the word cloud you saw was specifically from the words I typed into the app. So when you enter a happiness level, you also can type in text. So that's the text I typed in, and I had the associated level. Another cool thing that would be interesting to add in the future is to monitor like SMS messages and like actually mine that text, but privacy implications and lots of ways to go. Yeah.
Have you considered using facial coding to capture your
I have. I haven't looked into if Android can do this, but it would be cool if whenever you picked up your phone, your front-facing camera would just take a shot. That's something to do. Yeah. Yeah, it's cameras are pretty restricted in terms of what you can access and what you can do. So, yes.
What other sort of lazy methods have you thought about for input?
I think the laziest is just to predict. Like, I just carry my phone in my pocket, I do nothing, and then I get a timeline of like what my happiness is. And I think eventually that's where I'll go. So we'll see. Yeah.
Retention is usually like a big problem for most tracking technologies or applications. How do you think that affected your ability to use the app? The fact that it was like your app, you wanted to test it, did you feel like at any point after the experiment there was like blips where you were like, this is a little bit annoying, or maybe started to use it more because you saw positive trends? I think like those graphs impacted retention.
Interesting. So just to clarify, you're talking about my retention.
Right.
Okay.
Really personally interested.
Yeah. So yeah, there were times when I was like, oh, this is a bother, I'm not going to use it. And I'm kind of new to quantified self. Like, this is my first real attempt to measure stuff, and it had huge effect for me. But I didn't really care about it until I saw that it was helping. So until I was like, this is giving me like useful data, I was like, why am I doing this? And I had to kind of push myself. But now it's kind of, it's a nice thing. I do it because I know it can help me. All out of questions. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Oh, okay. No? Thank you. Oh, sure. If
sure.
I'm still here.
No, I just wanted to say, it's wonderful, the metric to measure happiness. I applaud your effort in that. And my question really spawns around kind of the definition of happiness and how how you came to a conclusion within that. I know there was a study done at UCLA and broke happiness down into two different areas. One kind of wellness and meaning of life, and the other is kind of self-gratifying. And so within that, how was your experience with the assessment that you had to provide in the scale? The happiness that is the first kiss versus the birth of the child, versus the winning or the lack of winning of a sporting event.
So my thesis that I'll give you, and I've read some scientific stuff, but this isn't like 100% corroborated. Can't say this. Is that there is short-term happiness and there's long-term happiness, and I think what you're hitting on with meaning is long-term happiness, or just long-term well-being. And the idea with Happsee was to measure that long-term change with really short-term stuff. And long-term trends tend to be like an amalgam of short-term things anyways. So what you saw here with some of the trends that I showed you, these trends were built up from like 50 entries, 100 entries. And I think the idea is to combine the knowledge contained in those entries and make them a larger thing. Now, to address your question about different kinds of happiness, I agree that that's true. I also agree that most of the stuff underlying that can be measured passively. So for example, if you're in the hospital and you're really happy and you haven't been in the hospital before and you've mentioned that your wife's pregnant, you're probably having a baby. Whereas if you're at like, well, not you, your wife, or whatever is having a baby. So whereas if you're at a sporting event and you're really happy, it's probably because the sports team won. So there are ways to kind of disambiguate that. Those ways aren't implemented yet, but I'd love to actually work on those. I think that's really exciting.
What was the circadian profile of your happiness? Like day, night? You must have had afternoon. What was it?
That is an interesting thought. I have, actually, I can look at it right now. It's like one of those things you never actually like check or internalize. Okay, so we're doing it. Yeah, I know this is really exciting, guys. By hour, all time. Okay, so I hate 7 o'clock. I'm okay with 8 p.m. I'm okay with 8 p.m. I never get up before. My first entry is at 5 a.m. and I'm really angry then. So I hate the morning. I get better by the afternoon. Then I get really unhappy around like 2 p.m. And then I start to get better, and then I get really unhappy around like 7 p.m. and then I start to get better.
So 2 hours after you eat, it goes downhill.
Who knows?
And then
When do you typically leave work?
Actually, I don't like work for someone now, so I just kind of work whenever. So I never leave. It's great.
Thanks so much again.